Thank you so much. I'm one of the founding partners of a design agency in Boulder called Emerson. We've been around for about the past 5 years, and before that I've been in the industry for about 15 years, kind of starting out in design, moving into marketing, advertising, product design, and then kind of back to design in the most general possible sense. We founded the shop really to be able to have this kind of idea of a broad spectrum design, taking design into more ways for more companies than we were really able to do before, helping from branding through product design and through marketing design. One bit that David and Reed didn't actually get to mention was the fact that we got to come in to help out with both the Digible branding as well as the Fiona branding. And Fiona actually got to be featured in a branding case study and awards guide this last year. So that was pretty cool for, I think, everybody around. More for us than for them. I've loved design kind of my entire life. I remember at about 9 years old, I went to a Goodwill store with my dad, and he pointed out what is to this day one of my favorite possible logos, and the secret bit of Goodwill. Does anybody know? Yeah, the face there in the corner is actually the G from the Goodwill itself. And I remember at the age of 9, that blew my mind. That there was a career, that there was something in this world that someone could do where they sat there drawing and sketching and said, hey, what if I make this just a little bit better than it needs to be? And I think what's so important about this is the fact that it basically gave Goodwill an ability to advertise and market for 25 additional years. From me boring everybody in middle school, all the way through today where I get to talk to all of you in here. You're a much better audience than I usually get outside of the agency these days. I also teach at the University of Colorado in design and branding. So I'll pick on all of you maybe for a couple questions today, and just look at me like a senior in college, just absolutely terrified for the entire thing. But this idea of design that we tried to bring into our own practice ended up trying to be a lot wider than we initially thought about. So I think design in many ways, especially when I worked in more traditional marketing and advertising, was much more focused around what's the font that we're using, what's the exact shade of blue, or can we move that button just a little bit to the left? And I think that's, not only is that a good way to burn out designers, but that's a way to kind of bore everybody else in that practice. Will your customer ever care if the button was here or right there? Unless they're neurotic, probably not. But this idea of correct branding and correct design, it ends up being the way that we can start to talk about much larger brands. When branding really connects with somebody, it's the reason that we buy Nike. It's the reason that we drink Coke, and it's the reason that we love that heart on the bottom of the Southwest Airlines. Now, obviously, these are easy examples when you have a $100 million budget, and if any of you have that, we are available for work. But I think more importantly than at this much larger scale, it's also the reason that we're still talking about, the arrow within the FedEx logo. It's the Goodwill logo. The Goodwill logo is actually done as part of a design competition. They probably donated a little bit of money, but it wasn't, at this type of scale. It was just from a design team that really wanted to make something that worked over the long run. This double click thing is going to kill me. So it's the reason that it works, today. It's the reason that it worked when it was unveiled in 1982. And it's kind of this idea of, how can design connect to people in this much broader sense? So bringing this into all of you today, I could show you just, logos from the 80s all day long and talk about them, but I don't think that's going to be as most entertaining. So I want to try to bring this all back to you with your design, your marketing, your branding that you're doing for the apartments. How can we actually make sure that all of you get to have a little bit of that spark from what we've talked about? Maybe that it's going to bring it into, more customers are clicking through and coming into the site. Or even more residents just love the place that they live. How do you make a place that people love to live through all of your other communication? Is there a way to do a single click, or it's a me problem at this point? So one of the things that we always joke about is my wife and I for years have just loved if you lived here, you'd be home by now. And we usually do it at the worst part of every vacation. So it's like raining, we're in the middle of nowhere. And it's but if you lived here, you'd be home by now. Does anybody know when this was first created? During the late 1970s and early 1980s, there was this idea, like during kind of the urban exodus around the East Coast, these were popping up on billboards for apartments on the way that people were commuting. And so it was like, hey, don't live in this place that you don't love anymore. If you lived here, you'd be home by now. And for the first couple of years, that was pretty cool. Has anybody actually used this, though? All right, I like all of you a lot more. So in this bit of talking about design, like you can have these platitudes, you can have these quick little lines, but that's going to be kind of going the way of the dinosaur. If anybody opens up your site and that's the first thing that they see, if it's not a joke, it's going to probably land a little bit flat. And so you have to start relying a little bit more on your branding and a little bit more on your design. But again, not relying on it in the sense of just what's the color, but what is that entire experience? So bringing this a little bit outside of our initial practice just for a second, I always like to try and show this example of, when clients ask, like, what is good design? I think that when we think of good design, or if you just Google good design, almost every image is kind of like this idealized Pinterest, strip everything away piece. But I think that this is actually like antithetical to great design. I don't want to work at that desk. I can't really see what else is happening on that piece. And my entire life can't just be like 2 succulent plants in like a creepy white room by itself. I think one of the things that this fails at in the realm of good design is that it's not useful, right? I hope all of your desks at your offices are a little bit more usable than this. And so in our mind, like, design has to be useful. It has to do something that we can actually start to care about. Design doesn't need to be the way it looks. It's what it actually does for us. Does anybody remember like having one of these, or do any of you still have kind of the hand juicer? It's not much to look at, but design-wise, this is one of the most successful pieces of industrialized design in American history. It was first premiered in 1938. They're still in production today. It works, you juice it, it holds the pulp, everything else works out. But there was kind of this idea of how do we start making something that's better? Everybody wants to improve upon design, but many people, I think, only focus on the aesthetics, and that's where they fail. Philippe Starck ended up creating a juicer called the Juicy. And while it looks like an invasion from outer space, you can get at least the idea of how this would work, right? You juice on the top, it's supposed to drip all the way down into your glass of your villain's layer down below. But I think that this completely ended up actually failing. As people juice, there's even videos of people trying to do it. The spindly little legs slip everywhere. The juice goes everywhere else. It doesn't hold the pulp. It's a beautiful object, but I think that it completely fails in design. And if we have this definition that we use at the shop of design needing to be useful, then this is terrible design. And design that doesn't work or design that isn't useful is just bad art. And we have enough of that in the world already. And so when you think about when you're making your sites, when you're making your pamphlets, when you're working on any type of marketing outreach, if it doesn't convert, if it's not usable, if it's not working on the analytics side, it's probably just really bad art, and no one's going to hang it up on the fridge. And the other bit that I want to get into is this idea of when you can bring in delight. I think that that's something that's often overlooked in design practices just because it's, you have deadlines, you don't have infinite budget. What can you do to start bringing in a little bit more thoughtfulness, a little bit more delight to your current customers? Chase actually did this really well back in the 1980s when they first, or early 1990s, when they first brought in digital banking. They tried to mimic that experience, the previous experience, with a bit of surprise to create something that was new and delightful. So when you logged onto the site, they had, "Welcome back, Andy. Your May statement is available below." That was trying to mimic what happened in the physical space. They were using your previous experience of going into a bank, talking to the teller, and having a little bit of that experience, and they brought it in here. While most of the rest of online banking feels completely impersonal, this was something that ended up feeling kind of nice, and for so long really differentiated them in the entire market. If you don't have Chase, if you have anybody else, everybody probably does that bit where they grab your first name now, and it feels a little bit boring. And so there's not as much of a delight there, but they're able to bring it, when they're trying to do something new, it's focusing on that element of delight. So they're having to change themselves. They're having to always evolve. And I think that if you're in this room already, you get to be the one that's a little bit unique. You get to be the one that is focusing on something new, and hopefully from today start to realize what these elements are that can bring delight to customers. So moving the conversation directly into branding, when we founded the shop, there's basically two principles that we try to bring into every piece of our branding. And these are the strategic principles that we did for Digible and Fiona. They're the same ones that we do for every client that comes in the shop. And it's the idea of bringing in consistency and empathy. And what do I mean by this? The idea of going in through empathy is the easy act of putting yourself in your customer's shoes. Who are they? Why are they here? And what do they want? I think with the practice that all of you have, it's actually more important than almost anything else, because you're having to hit somebody during one of the areas that they need the most empathy in their lives. They're making a huge decision. They're moving They're moving through a town. They're moving to a completely new city. They need a lot of hand-holding. There's going to be a lot of things that are happening at that time. And I think that when we look at pure examples from the industry, this example from Fairfield does a really wonderful job. They understand who their user is. They know why they're coming to the shop, and they've created copy and design and branding that makes sense for it. One, they look as happy as humanly possible. And two, look at this. You have a custom accent wall and a welcome mat for Fido. What is the empathetic piece here? It's the idea that she loves her dog, and now you're a company, you're a brand telling her, I'm empathetic towards you, I'm putting myself in your shoes, I know you love that dog, and we'll give you, probably a weird welcome mat that has our logo on it, not yours, right? But the empathy that brings in there is something that they're able to end up showcasing for, creating a bit of that connection. It's basically the handshake between a brand and the eventual customer. Broadcast Center also does this in an extremely great way, in the sense that they're bringing in a little bit more copy, a little bit more brand and empathy into who their customer is. Looking at this space, it feels like it's probably going towards somebody moving new to town, their first real salary position in life, probably at the bottom of the totem pole in whatever the job they're in. And the empathy that Broadcast Center brings in is, we get it. We know who you are. We know how hard your job is. We know that feeling all too well. And in any place that you're marketing, whether it's to Gen Z, Gen Y, millennials, Gen X, figure out what it is with that empathetic link that they need at that point in time. How can you communicate to them with what they're stressing out about? And basically offering yourself as more than four walls, we're going to be your next home. So the second piece here is this idea of moving much more into consistency. Consistency ends up being a little bit more of kind of the tactical elements of branding. It's the aesthetics, it's the communication channels, it's the photography that you use. For any of you that are trying to figure out the attribution that's coming on your site, thinking about how many bits of traffic are coming from apartments.com or from Google searches, how do you create a little bit of that consistency so that the first time someone sees you on apartments.com and then comes to the site, it ends up feeling like they're at the same company. So I think Union Denver, just down the street, actually does this extremely well. The first photo that they have up in their hero shot is the first hero shot that they have up on apartments.com. If you click on it, when you pop over here, there's a little bit of that consistency between their different channels. What's even better is that was one of the rooms that you could end up actually touring in the beginning, so then there's consistency all the way through to that experience of seeing if this is actually a building you want to have. Their copy makes sense, and it feels consistent both in the choices of typeface and colors, as well as the rest of their site. Now, a horrible example, and I hope that this is nobody in the room, is Alexa and Henderson. One of our elements here with this conversation of consistency is wondering what on earth this is advertising. If I came from apartments.com, I saw the 2-bedroom that was my absolute dream. I click on it, I get here, and I wonder, am I going to be binge drinking with everybody on this page? Do we potentially have a collie with some doggles on for the afternoon? It's hard to understand, is this the hottest new brunch place in Nashville, or is this going to be my next apartment complex? There's no consistency in type, in message, and it really doesn't feel like the company has empathy towards what it is that I need at this time. So when you're trying to make your own sites, when you're trying to work on these types of projects, thinking about what type of message you want to send with your empathy and making sure that that feels consistent across the board. Now, there's one company that I think is kind of a nice hot topic to bring in for today that does this better than almost anybody else. Technically outside the industry, but they're marketing towards all of your customers as well. And that's Airbnb. Airbnb has the empathy of you're traveling, you don't want the hotel, you want a personalized experience, and you want to have something that's brand new. So come to us. They have consistency in the fact that their mobile app looks like their billboards. It looks like their hand-drawn version of the logo. And I think what blows my mind about Airbnb as a travel company is this tagline of welcome home. That's a tagline that all of you in this room should be able to own. And I think Airbnb actually owns it better than almost anybody else. You're traveling around the country, you're traveling around the world, and they always make you feel at home. And they're able to do that through kind of those initial pillars of branding. So as you're thinking about your own sites and your own projects, that's going to be kind of the basis that you want to have. How can you make it where when somebody else looks at your site, they immediately feel like this is the ultimate way, this is the ultimate tagline, and I wish that it could apply to me as well. So giving myself a chance to grab some coffee, I'll pick on a couple of you, and since you're sitting in the front row, it gets to be you. How do you currently think about branding, and how is design and branding affecting you in your current work today? Yeah, Lauren.
My challenge is like educating marketing teams that a font is not a logo.
A font is not a logo. That's a good base. Why do you have to educate them on that?
Well, I think part of it could be ownership groups as well, as they see the color palette, which sometimes that's too limited. There's not enough secondary colors to handle hover states, big states. And they don't understand Facebook dealing with a square image. You look at Southwest American, and they have their two different logos. They have the one with their in many ways.
See, it's
Oh, okay. Okay, oh, there we go. We're back. So in many ways, I mean, the current state of your design is half herding cats and then half the tactical pieces of how do you make sure there's consistency across these different elements. So it's a problem in consistency. Does anybody think that they have a problem in empathy? That the teams that you're working with don't understand who the users are that you're actually marketing towards? Does that resonate?
Definitely does. It's just that I think any time that I'm thinking about logo, design, messaging, branding, I'm thinking about how is that going to connect with our end user, and obviously, I mean, what image is that portraying to them? Does it evoke emotion? All of those things that we're trying to do in multifamily to get from the image.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that one of the things that I saw when I was kind of researching around a bunch of different sites for this is that so many of them were looking exactly the same, from student housing to senior living, from San Diego to New York. And it felt in many ways like there's no empathy for that end user. Some of the sites actually looked pretty great. And I was looking at one of the sites, I was like, this looks pretty nice. And it was like for 55 and up. And I was like, not quite yet. So it's in many ways like these two pillars are the pieces that we always have to come back to. As a shop, it's something that we have to challenge ourselves on often enough. We do try to, after 5 years and maybe after even longer, we feel that we usually don't know that we're usually beyond a font is not a logo. But besides that core element, I think that having that deep understanding of who the customer is ends up being a problem for everybody forever. So moving into kind of the tactical meat of what I wanted to chat with you about today is showing off a little bit of work that we've done at the agency. These will be examples outside of the actual industry that you're in today, but thinking about them much more in the sense of how can you use this and how can you apply it into your work. I did want to take examples outside of the industry so you're not comparing one-to-one, but you're thinking much more around how can you apply this into your current work. So the 3 case studies are broken out into really the tactical piece that I think ends up applying to apartment marketing more than anything else. So for the first one, for the first case study, it's this idea of working to build trust. And why do we think that trust is so important? I think with the customers that you're dealing with, you're not selling them a $10 a month subscription. You're not selling them a t-shirt that they'll wear for a season. You're selling them on something that's quite large. You know, when you close a deal, this customer that you're marketing to, this customer that you're trying to build trust and empathy with, is going to be worth likely $10,000 or more to the company that you're representing. And that's huge. Like, that's usually the amount of money that we're dealing with when we're marketing towards enterprise companies. And so when you're thinking about what you have to do, I think that building trust in the beginning is so important. It's the reason, you know, at its core, why if you lived here, you'd be home by now probably doesn't work today, because everybody knows about that and there's not really much trust to be built into it. So we had a company that we worked with last year called Sensu. They basically started out as an open source software platform that needed to move into the enterprise to be able to scale. They looked like everybody else in the industry. They looked cheap. There really wasn't a whole lot going on with what they had and what they were doing. And I think the worst part about it was that they weren't able to build trust because they had these platitudes as their marketing, and they had a logo that we feel didn't really end up working or servicing them of what they needed to become. So the logo itself ended up being kind of that original version. We ended up morphing them into something that felt a little bit more mature. The market itself ended up trying to be able to reference what they had and evolving them into this new market. How do you end up building trust through just a logo? It's not just a font. We created this one from scratch. But the market itself ended up actually just existing as the initial foundation for what they wanted to have as a brand. If it's a technology company, our joke has always been like, just make it blue and the client will probably be fine. But we wanted to change that up just a little bit. So we gave them a little bit of blue because we wanted them to approve it. But we also brought in these other color palettes to end up building trust and showing the clients, hey, we're a little bit different than everything that you've anticipated and everything that you've expected from this type of a relationship. We tried to work through all of the photography, all the copy. There are photos before, like if you've ever seen any technology site, it was just like photos of blue server rooms, which doesn't build a whole lot of trust because like that's just, I feel like it's, you know, the tagline is just like technology today and tomorrow. And so we ended up creating this whole series of illustrations, getting to showcase, you know, what type of work that they did. So Sensu at its core was this infrastructure management and monitoring piece. That is extremely boring, and I almost fell asleep as I was talking about it. But what we tried to show was the different layers that they, you know, come in and attack. And so from the fun side of illustration and creating this brand piece that builds trust, we were able to showcase, hey, here's where we're going to be able to plug into. And talking directly to developers, this is the type of work that we can actually be able to do. At the same time, we brought our copywriters in to change all of the copy on the site to be speaking directly towards the end customer. Again, that idea of empathy in here, we had to build trust with developers. And so instead of these short pieces of, you know, your server better, we ended up actually doing a lot more long form pieces. We showcased and shared a lot of the technology that we had and ended up making this whole series of both iconography and illustrations that worked across the site and worked with the brand itself to kind of elevate what it was that they were trying to show. These are just business cards, but I think one of the things that was so fun about this was the first time that their CEO used the business cards for a meeting, somebody came back and they're like, oh, are you a 500-person company? And he was like, we are currently 12, but soon enough. And it's this idea of building this level of trust in there. It makes you feel a little bit more premium than you are without having that be the only message that you can offer. The site that we ended up creating for them focused so much more on this, you know, much larger, longer form copy, total visibility from the server closet to the serverless cloud future. For everybody in this room, like, that might not mean a whole lot, but for the developers that we were marketing towards, this built trust in all the different ways. From get started to learn about enterprise, we were showcasing the documentation of all of our work. We were showcasing what it was that made the company actually special. So we were able to build trust from the first contact in a little bit of our marketing all the way through kind of the eventual sales calls. Sensu ended up actually being a really nice case study for us because the whole idea of building trust first with them worked now, and you know, it worked for the whole year that we were working with them. After we finished the branding, they ended up moving into raising a round of a little bit over $12 million. The biggest part was that they successfully moved into enterprise sales. Before, most of their sales were kind of in the $500 to $1,000 mark because that was all that their brand, that their messaging, that their sales could really handle. And after this radical change, they were able to move much more into the enterprise where the deals were, usually in the 5-figure range, able to grow that bit of the team. So that was a huge thing for us to be able to give them the tools that they needed to succeed. And then the worldwide launch, we actually been working with them over the last couple of months to translate the site into 6 more languages. So they'll end up having this idea of building trust now localized for the people that need it. So if you're building a serverless cloud infrastructure company, this is applicable to you. But bringing it back to everybody in this room, how do we end up applying these ideas of trust, into the work that you're doing? I think the bit that we talk about a lot is not every property is a luxury property. I feel like, luxury apartment living is you'd be here by now. Let's be honest with customers. How can you end up bringing this back to what it is that you do today? Not every customer wants luxury living. They want to have something that feels native and honest and true to them. So as a mean example, we covered up the logo. But this is a website with some luxury townhome living. And I feel like when I see luxury, I want like marble countertops and like a view over the city and just this entire aesthetic and vibe. This looks like a completely lovely townhome, and it looks like from a really wonderful company. But at the same time, there's no honesty here. They aren't able to build trust with their customers because of the fact that the very first thing a customer sees on the site, they're like, maybe. And then for the rest of that experience and the rest of that relationship, if they're like, oh, well, don't worry, it's really easy to get your security deposit back, they're like, but is it though? And changing that into a much better example, instead of just the platitude of luxury apartment living, just have somebody tell us that it's great. I love my apartment. I love the fact that I can walk to everything that I need. 90% sure that's a stock photo on the right-hand side, but the sentiment works out well, right? It's a real testimonial from a real person who's saying that you can trust this place. The marketing team didn't have to do anything besides, probably request from a current resident, hey, do you like living at this place? So this is something that all of you can do, and I think that that's the one bit that I want all of you to take away from this branding discussion is branding isn't about hiring a marketing team and hoping for the best. Branding is about giving them those tools that they can end up using themselves. So the second case study today is around the idea of showing and building personality. Again, why is personality applicable to everybody in this room and to most companies that you deal with? The customers that you're dealing with, you're affecting the next year of their lives, right? Besides their job, you're probably affecting the second question they get when they meet everybody else. What do you do? What part of Denver do you live in, right? Like that's the second question that usually happens in the beginning, during first introductions. And you're really the one that's helping them create that community, that sense of belonging. Outside of the 9 to 5, this is where they're going to be going. So we had the opportunity last year to work with a company called Open Snow and Open Summit, or actually maybe a couple years ago. Does anybody ski and has ever used Open Snow before? Sweet. So we got to do all of that a few years back. We helped them launch this new company called Open Summit, which is basically a weather and forecasting report for summertime. There's a few of those on the App Store. So the only way that we could really compete was this idea of bringing in personality into the product design itself. So in the beginning, we created a little bit of a brand. We wanted this to look and feel kind of like 1930s, 1940s national park systems. Created like a custom little badge that they could turn into patches and give out to customers. And then we kind of hit a brick wall with the initial bit of marketing and with the initial app design, because the app at its core is a weather and reporting app for people hiking in the outdoors. The hiking in the outdoors is fun, but the core of the app itself is, please use this app and we'll tell you how not to get struck by lightning. That's kind of the worst. We don't know how to make people open an app if every time you open it up, it's like, if you don't leave by 5 a.m., you're going to die. The utility of that actually works out well, but the personality, we felt that there was a disconnect. So we kind of went back to think about who are our customers? How do we end up making something for them that they love to use and that they want to open up, even if they're not going up a mountain that day? And so we came to this realization of there needed to be the personality for this group of adventure and storytelling. And so over the course of about a month and a half, we ended up creating a series of custom illustrations and this idea of storytelling. So even when somebody wasn't hiking that morning, they could open up the app, learn a little bit more about the outdoors, read some articles, see what other people are doing in hiking, and have this whole illustration set in behind them. So the illustrations themselves ended up focusing across the board from the initial planning and base camp stages all the way through travel itself, learning about the outdoors, and then this final one was actually my favorite. It's the profile page that has your history of every hike that you've done while using the app. And it was kind of this like, you've dumped all of your gear, you have the wet raincoat, and it's sitting there, at the core of your couch. And this bit of personality that we brought into the entire story meant that people could put themselves into this situation, even if they weren't using the app at that moment. And it ended up working out both for us and for the company. So as we initially launched the product, the company was able to start focusing on what happens with this data, how can we start sourcing more data, and I think that one of the big pieces of it was we needed to start getting a critical mass of users to start making that data really worthwhile. So this is kind of an example of some of the screens from the initial joining all the way through learning a little bit more about Colorado's 14ers. For those of you that are from outside of the state, 14ers we have 54 of them in the state, and it's any mountain over 14,000 feet. If you climb all of them, you get a free coffee. But one of the fun things for us with this was the amount of feedback that we got from the community at large. So not just the client was happy, thank goodness. Their initial customers enjoyed it, but we started seeing people, online saying, I love the artwork in this app. And when was the last time that you made a site or you made a brand where people just randomly tweeted, this is above average? That was pretty unique, and that was a really fun thing that we got to see. So people were sharing it with each other, and we were actually seeing feedback in the App Store that people were using this app and people were sharing this app with each other, even with the review saying, I don't hike, but I love having this app on my phone. And that's incredible. And I think that, on so many sites that we see for apartment marketing, it's refer a friend here. And if I'm not there, like, why would I refer a friend? And if I already am a resident, wouldn't I just tell a friend to move in? Like, that's a strange button to end up having. But with the right story and with enough personality in there, I think that that's actually something that, could end up feeling really successful. And on the fun personal side, there was one time we were hiking up at Long's Peak. We saw some clouds coming in, and a random hiker that we were with said, oh, let me look at Open Summit and see if this works out. Have you seen it? It looks really cool. I didn't say anything, but my wife looked over and she's like, you love this right now. So for them, it ended up being a really successful launch. We created a brand new company with this, that they've been able to actually grow both on the marketing and advertising side as well as their internal staff. For the month that it launched, it was one of the top travel apps in iTunes. Like there was a time where we were like balancing with United, and I think that we don't leave dogs out on the tarmac, so I think we're even a better company at this point. It's crazy. And in the first year, they've gained over 2 million users with the application itself. I'd like to think most of that is from the design itself, but it's also a very usable app. If any of you live in Colorado or if you're hiking any tall peaks around the rest of the United States, check it out this summer. So bringing this back to everyone in the room, what do you have to do to have this element of a fun personality? I guarantee you that a lot of you get apartments that you look at the first photo of the building and you're like, oh no, not beige again. There has to be something else. But you can create the personality for what type of community you end up wanting to have. What does a person want to see in that neighborhood? What does a person want to see what does a person want to feel when they tell them, oh, I live at this apartment complex? For examples of how not necessarily to do it, Apex on the Highline, a font as a logo, ends up losing out on this idea of personality because aside from being really hard to read, what state is this in? Right? Who is this for? What age range, is likely looking at this page? There's nothing that really works on the personality side because it's just the template that comes with it. And I think that you could end up changing that conversation. You could bring in more personality and looking at even what some of the student housing does, right? happy friends hanging out with each other, slight changes in colors, in typefaces, in the way that they talk about what's happening with the amenities. This page is oozing with personality. There's so much happening on here that we could end up, actually making this work. What I think is kind of fun and a hard challenge is, how do you make this work for different generations? Could you use that same template of photos of people on the right and some text on the left to market a senior housing? I think so, right? You change the colors, you change the face, but you're always thinking about who it is that's actually coming and wanting to rent in that community at that time. So the final case study for today is this idea of being useful. We talked about this in the beginning with the world's worst juicer. I think design at its core has to be useful. And why is that important for all of you besides the obvious? It's the idea that you don't want to be a commodity. Right now, how many of you are competing with other marketing companies for all the properties that you deal with? Have you ever lost a property because somebody else says, oh, don't worry, we'll do it better, we'll get you more leads, we'll get you more conversions because we have the secret sauce? So through branding, through marketing, that ends up being how you end up having that secret sauce, is that useful piece, when combined with everything else, makes the site into something people actually want to use. Has anybody here ever ordered Blue Apron or Purple Carrot, any of those meal kits? Why did you cancel? It was way too much packaging, right? The amount of waste, the amount of packaging that came in it was awful. And that was basically what we saw from 3 months worth of research, both on looking online and interviewing customers. With all of the meal kits out there, there needed to be a better design solution, because you open it up and you're like, cool, I got 4 carrots and about 12 pounds of waste. And so about the end of 2017, we engaged with a company called Nordic Ice. If you've ordered from any of these companies, Nordic Ice is basically the packaging in it, and you get this like creepy little Viking guy. He's mysterious. And what they had as a company was this non-recyclable plastic. They had non-compostable gels. They had additional foams that wouldn't compost for the next 1,000 years. All of the packaging that was in there that brought fresh vegetables and fresh food to your house made it so that generations down the road wouldn't be able to enjoy it. And so we were challenged with both two things. One, making it more useful for the customers so that their customers didn't cancel on them. And for them as well, they wanted to start moving into the pharmaceutical market. They dominated already in meal kit, but they needed to start reaching into somewhere else. So we had to make a brand that felt useful both to their existing groups as well as to a new one. So on the fun and easy side, we ended up updating the mark. So the Viking itself stayed around because almost everybody forgot what their name was, but they're like, oh yeah, we buy from the Viking company. So we kept him in the new mark. We ended up creating a custom typeface and keeping, again, that blue logo, because it's ice, it's kind of the right answer. What was really fun when we launched this and created the rest of the brand was how much, as a company, they embraced it. And that put us into a really good position because it allowed us to start recommending things to them after they had that initial bit of trust. The brand itself was really, really cool for us because that mark, that Viking itself, was printed about 4 billion times in the first year, which is about like 3.9 billion more times than I've ever had a logo printed before. But we realized, like, after 3 months of this, that, wow, that number's huge, but that can't be sustainable. That's got to be something that we already feel bad about. But that, I don't want to see my logo in the trash. I don't want to see my logo decomposing by the side of the road. And so we were able to be in this nice position with them where we said, the reason people are canceling from you right now is because they hate that waste. And the pharmaceutical clients, your new markets will end up appreciating you adding a little bit of extra effort. And everybody else wants to start seeing this. And so that's kind of the weirdest and most boring part of the overall brand project. But the design of it was pretty simple. But it ended up actually bringing kind of a whole new life into the company. So one of the biggest things that we did with them was we changed all of their gels to be compostable. So if you ever order Blue Apron again, you can cut it, pour it in the backyard or pour it down the drain. It's completely safe. And the plastics themselves are now all recyclable as number 4 plastics. And so that was a huge thing for us to be able to have a win with. And it was also changed the entire conversation around the brand. Purple Carrot ended up calling them after a month and a half and said, we don't have the support calls that we had before. We don't have the churn that we had before. This actually went down. And what was so cool about this was the idea that it wasn't just designed for aesthetic's sake. It wasn't just designed saying new improved packaging with same great look. It was actually changing the entire mode of how that company operated. And so the useful pieces that we had for them, on the tactical side, it was allowing packaging that could be co-branded with any of their partners. But what was fun with this is both of these packages don't have to be thrown completely in the trash anymore. They could end up being changed, stored. Of course, they can be reused, but they ended up actually having a whole new life in being compostable and recyclable here. That was their old site. I promise we didn't do that. You'd think that was from 2001, but they launched that in 2016. So we came in and helped them out a little bit. The conversions on their new sites, we ended up having a whole bunch of pages really focused on pharmaceutical because, again, they had so much domination within the meal kit market that we ended up just focusing on kind of who their new market is and who they needed to communicate with. But that bit of being useful in all of this design, it was moving beyond just the aesthetic elements. So across the board, we had support calls for Nordic Ice itself decreased by 25%, just from an hourly rate perspective. Like, that's going to save tens of thousands of dollars per year. They decreased churn from all of their customers. So that's going to end up representing hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars in years. And then for kind of our feel good at the office, there was a huge environmental impact. 100 million square feet of plastic that's created every single month now gets to be fully recyclable in the work that we do. And so there was a site, there was a brand on this, but I think bringing this back into today, how do we end up making these learnings and this idea of being useful kind of work for everybody here? I think that it's trying to, again, figure out what it is that customers want and what customers need to do on your site. So rather than just saying floor plans and then giving me these static 2D pieces, show me what's great about a floor plan. Hey, this one features a gigantic kitchen if you love to cook. This one has 2 bedrooms that are spacious with additional closets. That's good for you because of these reasons. Focus at all times around how do you educate your customer and how do you give them what they need at these individual times. I think that so many places when you click on a location tab, it's just one dot on Google Maps. Like, this doesn't really help anybody at the end of the day, right? If I click on here and I'm new to town or I'm moving to Denver, maybe if I have eagle eyes I can see that there's Coors Field, but is there good coffee here? Is there fun schools? Is there great grocery stores nearby? Like, how do I what do I actually do in this neighborhood, and how does this help define me going forward? Versus what 11 West is doing, they have that same map, and that's fine. Could probably zoom in a little bit. But they have an entire page around what bank is close by, who's your grocery, what's your entertainment, what are you going to be doing morning, noon, and night if you live in this area. So they've created this useful piece of what is the community going to be, and end up having an entire personality built around that. So the people that are moving into this place end up getting a picture of what their life looks like moving forward. So for these tactical pieces, I think it's super important to start thinking about the idea of, now that you have empathy and consistency, how do you build trust? How do you show personality? And most importantly, how are you useful in all of your branding and marketing? So all of this, I kind of dumped everything on you. I know that there's probably both questions that you have, and then thinking about your current projects, ones that have been successful or ones that you've wanted to kind of have be done in a different way. But again, you don't have to do these things alone. Most of you are here with other people from your company. Start chatting through with them. Hey, if you were looking at this website, what would you actually want to see on it? Ask the current tenants, what made you love this place? What made you click on us and come to us rather than somebody else? Or one of my favorites is actually work with the photographers who are photographing the apartments. What did you see that you loved about this place? What did you see that you thought could be really useful? And when you were parking in the neighborhood, was there anything else that you found that was kind of fun around there? Find these other resources, because again, branding doesn't have to just be dump it on a design or marketing team and hope for the best. It can be much more around this conversation of, what are you even trying to do with these sites? So final question for all of you. This can be a little bit rhetorical, but have an existential crisis in your head. Think about how many branding and marketing sites have you actually had to create in the last year? How many times have you had to go through this entire exercise in the last 12 months? Even worse, how many times have you had to do it in the last 3 years? so many times. It can feel like a grind. It can feel like every single time of like, oh God, I have to think about consistency and empathy and all these other elements again, trying to remember what it is, or starting from a blank slate. But I think that that's, my hope for all of you is that you don't just need to start with a blank slate. We have a lot of process that we've implemented at the shop. We have a lot of formulas, a lot of guidelines that we use ourselves. And I think that I would actually hope that all of you could end up using them yourselves. So make these charts, fill them out yourselves. They can be done on paper, they can be done in Excel, whatever it is that you're most comfortable. Create the strategic chart of what do you need to do for empathy for these customers? Who are they, and what can I do to help them out right now? This works not just in apartment marketing, but in every single type of branding that you'll ever do. Think about consistency. Where are customers first seeing the brand? Are they coming from Google? Are they coming from apartments.com? Are they coming from an ad or an email campaign that you actually were able to get to work? How do you make it so that every time they have a touch point with that brand or that company, it feels the same across the board? And those are the strategic pieces that work everywhere. Tactically, for apartment marketing, bring in a little bit of this idea of the questions of trust, personality, and useful. Think about the quality level you need. Again, not everything has to be a luxury apartment. Bring in that bit of honesty so people can trust you with everything else they need to do for that year. Think about what type of community that you want to make. This isn't necessarily saying it has to just be one age or one demographic, but much more around if it's near the mountains, let's have an outdoor personality. If it's in the middle of a city, let's talk about how great that is for commuting or whatever else it's going to be. Have that personality so that when you launch 2 sites in the same month, they feel like they come from different voices. And then finally, think about what you can do to be useful. Give these tools to the design team that's building it out. Give it to the developers so they're not just embedding a Google map on the page, but they're looking around. The cheating way is just like open up Foursquare with that zip code, and you can plug some of those things in. That's like the 5% bit that'll automatically put you into some of the top sites when people are searching. If the place that you're marketing is in the area, go there, spend an afternoon, go and try a bunch of coffee shops and, kind of get jittery and jacked up by about 5 p.m. So I hope that this has helped today. Remember that, if you lived here, this talk would be done by now. Thank you so much.